if you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Good morning and welcome to the May the 24th, 2022 edition of the Counter Racist Code Show, also called the CRCS, with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. First and foremost, we like to start off by saying thank you for listening to the program, and many of you, including myself, are still learning, but thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, and I thank you also. Thank you. To get in contact with today's show, as some have already done, but that's good, dial or put this number in, 516-453-9921, and press the number 1 button if you have a question or a comment. I would ask, please ma'am, please sir, to please make it brief so that Mr. Fuller can fully answer the question, because as you well know, many of you know, that he will give you a detailed suggestions or answers to your question using many, many examples to make it so that you can understand it. In other words, to eliminate confusion. And if you listen very carefully, you will see or hear that he uses logic, cause, and effect. But you have to listen. You have to listen. All that other stuff, you have to get it out of your mind and listen to what is being said and then apply logic to it. You can also email me at this address, the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Now, it may not be read on today's show, but at some point in time, and it will be read. And I've instituted a system to help me to forward those Gmails to be read by saying when I get it, when I receive it, I will put "got it" on it if it's not too lengthy. I will use the word "got it," and then that will help me to identify it, and at some point in time, it will be read. You can also join the chat room for this program. All you have to do is go to blogtalkradio.com, and then you want to go to programs, and then you want to put in the Produce Justice Show. The Produce Justice Show, click on that, and when that comes up, there's a place where you can click on chat room, and you can get into the chat. And occasionally, I will read some of the chats, but listen, you're in there. I would ask, please, ma'am, please, sir, do not use that as your method to ask a question to Mr. Fuller. Use the telephone number that we have given. That is the best way to do that. But now, occasionally, I will read some of the chats, but I'm asking, please, ma'am, please, sir, do not ask a question in the chat room for the show. We have the phone lines and the Gmail set up for that. So if you can do that, that'll be fine. Also, want to say that if you are a first-time caller or know someone that is a first-time caller, call into the show, and we have set up a situation where we want the first callers to be heard. So they kind of get a priority, I guess you could say, but they will be heard. So first-time callers. Now, don't try to slick us, because we have people at the control that know when you're not a first caller. So don't do that. Sometimes people try to use methods to get over, so don't do that. Please don't do that. Now, this last thing, I think this is the last thing. Mr. Fuller will be giving suggestions, and everything that he has given can be purchased or obtained by getting his book, which is called the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, or just called the Code Book. And you can get that by going to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com. That's how you get that book and all the information. It's a guide. It's a code book to know what to do and what not to do. And he will refer to it many, many times in today's program. All right, without further ado, I think that's all I have to do. Let's do this. We're trying to introduce this section of the program called The Thoughts and Expressions from the Mind of Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. Mr. Fuller, what are your thoughts and expressions today to open up today's program?
Well, they're usually all over the place. So many things to think about. But last night I was thinking about the CRT again, something that keeps coming up. Critical race theory, they call it. But then we can have all kind of CRTs. I mean, so that people just don't get hung up on certain words, and it gets in the way. As that old saying says, let the words get in the way of getting something constructive done. Don't let the words or anything else get in the way of constructive communications. So you can just have all kind of CRTs. I mean, and you just don't have to limit it to critical race theory, even though I think from what I've heard about it, that should be included. Everything should be included in any discussion that leads to what? The revelation of truth. That's the main thing. If you're going to get anything done, you have to be wedded to the truth. Anything in where you want what comes out of all of it, anything that people think, say, or do, and that is 2 words, constructive results. So you can have CRT, constructive result, truth. That's CRT. And then there are others, something I was thinking about last night, constructive results, trainee. And that's what I consider myself to be. And that's what I think everybody should be. We all should consider ourselves CRTs or constructive results trainees. We're in training, or should be, in producing what? Constructive results. Constructive results in what? In everything that we do and say. If you're sitting at a sidewalk cafe, and I see a lot of that now, particularly as the weather's getting warm, a lot of cities, rather, maybe some small towns, small towns too, have sidewalk cafes. So, you know, in the northwestern hemisphere, something that started in earnest, I think maybe about 30 years ago, and began to spread more and more in the summertime. So I see both white people and black people and people who consider themselves to be Asians in these sidewalk cafes when the weather is nice and pleasant. And sometimes there are quite a few black people with white people sitting at these tables. And I think about what they are talking about. I don't know. I don't listen to their conversations. That's eavesdropping. But I do see them as I walk past, or I'm in a vehicle and we're driving past, riding past, and I say, now, what are those conversations like? because according to the code, most conversations between black people and white people, if not all, fall into the category of tacky, trashy, and terroristic. And it never gets any better than tacky. Why? Because of the system of white supremacy itself. So anytime you see a black person and a white person having any kind of conversation, if you happen to listen to it or you're a participant in it, it's tacky. It's as tacky as it can be. I mean, it's a lot of unspoken thoughts going on there, things that people are thinking but they're not saying. Lots of it, catalogs of it. I strongly suspect. Reason being, when I hear black people talking about this conversation they had with the white person, they say a whole lot of things to me about that conversation that they didn't have with the white person. You know, they talk about how they had to bite their tongue about some things that were saying, you know, so that they didn't say the incorrect thing and set off something that gets to be trashy and terroristic. But it never gets any better than tacky. And then I started noticing some years ago that also applies to most conversations, period. When black people are talking to each other. Tacky, trashy, terroristic. And it certainly shows up among black people. That last T, I call it the 3 T's, the tragic arrangement. I put it all 3 of those 3 T's under that umbrella in capital letters. The tragic arrangement. Tacky, trashy, terroristic. The conversation will start off and remain tacky. Now, once a person participates in the conversation, if it goes on for a little while, then because it is so tacky, so loosely put together, it's so strained, people not saying things that are really on their minds and being truthful without setting off some type of situation that nobody wants to handle, nobody wants to be involved in. So in order to kind of loosen it up when it's tacky, then they say, well, I'm going to improve this conversation because we're being a little too serious here. And when black people are talking with white people, it gets serious real quick. And it's a little too serious. And that's making white people uncomfortable when they're talking to black people, or they're getting bored and they just want to opt out. Because black people are usually not talking about anything that white people want to hear anyway. And so the black person becomes aware of this, so they'll try to, what you call, loosen up the conversation some, so the people don't feel so uptight, so restrained. Then it goes to what? Trashy. There's nowhere else for it to go. And then if it gets a little too trashy, then it dips over into something where somebody gets offended, and then it becomes terroristic. So you got the 3 T's there in conversation, this tragic arrangement that both black people have with each other in conversations and with white people for sure. Tacky, trashy, terroristic. 1, 2, 3. It never gets any better than that. Never. And so, in order to get better in a compensatory way, I had to think about, well, how can it? And so what you do is that the black person has to lead that conversation. lead it by saying less. Let the white people talk to mostly each other, which they feel more relaxed in doing anyway. And the restraints come from the black person being present. So you become aware of that. And you only say something when there's something that is absolutely constructive to be said. And keep your sentences or your contribution to the conversation short. And don't say anything unless it's going to have a constructive result, a constructive effect. And simplify what you have to say. Think about what you have to say. Maybe you'll go, the conversation's been going on, say of about 5 or 6 people sitting at the same table. It's been going on now for a half an hour. But you make sure, if you're black, you say less than anybody else. That's another thing. That should be a part of your code. And that contributes to a better conversation between everybody present. The less the black person says. Once the black person starts saying more than anybody, then it becomes more and more tacky. It really does. Let the white people talk. And you be the great listener. And if you're asked, somebody might even turn around and ask, well, Saber, you're not saying much of anything here. And you say, well, I'm listening because I'm finding everything very interesting. I'm trying to absorb all this interesting talk. And so that kind of loosens it up, you might say, without it getting trashy. And that's most of what you will say, as an example. Those 2 words, more than anything. That's interesting. And just about everybody, whatever anybody is saying, you just simply say, that's interesting, and don't give much of your opinion on anything. That's another thing. Because then, if you start giving your opinion, everything's going to start getting uptight. If it's a black person doing most of the talking, and the white people are going to go more and more silent, and then the black person is going to become aware of the silence when they weren't silent before you started doing all this talking. So then the black person has a tendency to start talking trash. And then the white people start laughing, then the black person becomes the jokester, you might say, of the conversation. You know how that works. You become the clown now. You got to start clowning. You got to be Flip Wilson or somebody or some of the newer comedians. You got to make them laugh. All right, have them laughing and looking at each other and laughing, because now the clown is beginning to speak, and you're the clown, whether you're black male or black female. All right, because you became aware that the conversation is getting too tense. The black person is usually the first one to become aware of that after the white person gets tense. Okay? And so, because anytime there's a black person present, things, that tacky conversation, once it gets a little, you try to improve on it by becoming more serious. Black people talking to white people are not supposed to be serious, because white people, when they're talking seriously, they don't usually want a black person at the table anyway. All right? So the conversation is usually very trivial. But that trivial conversation is all tacky. And in order to improve on it, the black person will be the leader in making it trashy. And then somebody out of that trash is going to say something that's in the form of a trashy joke. But the joke is not going to be a joke as such, and it's going to kind of rub somebody the incorrect way. And then it's going to get tense, And then the conversation is going to get terroristic. Now, the bottom line is, if a black person is participating in any conversation, and we have to learn this because we don't know it now. We definitely don't know it now, and we show it. But anytime a black person, from here on in, starting with today, in the conversation that you have, let the other person do the talking. That's for black people. Do most of the talking. Stop running your mouth so much. Let the other person do most of the talking, whether the person is white or non-white. Get in the practice of doing that. I'm not going to do most of the talking. I'm going to let everybody else do almost all the talking until I really figure out where the conversation is going, what's on everybody's mind sitting there other than me, because I ain't saying nothing. All right? And then you come in. When you come in, you do a whole lot of thinking before you speak, and make sure that whatever you say is short and to the point and will have a constructive effect. Otherwise, stay in that no-talking lane. If you're black, don't be the one who carries the conversation, even though other people sitting there might want you to do that. They want to bounce everything off of you. But you have the least to say. And if somebody says, well, why are you not saying so much? Why are you not participating so much? Or something like that. You say, well, right now, my brain is just working to pick up what you all are talking about. So I'm just trying to keep up. And that's putting a little humor in it. That's being relaxed. And it's telling the truth, which is what you should be doing. Particularly if white people are talking, you should be the greatest listener in the world. If you're black, anywhere on the planet. When white people are talking, you should be the greatest listener in the world, logically speaking. Why? Because most of the time, white people are going to be saying something, even if it sounds like it doesn't make sense, or if it sounds like it's a bunch of foolishness and all like that. You keep this in mind. White people run all your business. So when people who are running all your business talk, you listen. This is the system of white supremacy we're in. And don't ever forget it.
All righty. Those are thoughts and expressions from the mind of Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., which will be an opening feature on the program. Let's go, new caller alert. Let's go to the new caller. Let's see. Unappreciated black third grade teacher from Ohio, new caller. Thank you for holding. And wait a minute, let me click you in. You are on with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
I noticed a similarity. Area 2 education begins on page 101 in the textbook, and Mr. Fuller also addressed the term education/educated person on page 101 in the Word Guide. My question for Mr. Fuller is there a reason why you did not specifically address the American educational system?
No, because education is just learning. And you're either learning something that is constructive or you're not. Anywhere you are on the planet, on a desert island or wherever, and anywhere on the bottom of the ocean, you're learning. Every situation is a school. The universe is a school. That's why they call some buildings where people learn, they call them universities. The entire universe is a school. So you notice things. I mean, as you walk down the street, you just notice everything. Education is the process of learning everything about everything. That's the codified definition. The process of learning everything about everything. So what does that mean that jumps out at you right now? Thinking about that as a definition. What is education? The process of learning everything about everything, which means there's no such thing as an educated person. Because that I know of, I don't know of no person, no mortal person, meaning a person here on earth, that can stand up and say, according to the code, I am educated. No, you're not. Do you know everything about everything? You're not educated. Education is an ongoing process that never ends, right up until the day that you die. And in answer to the question about the American education, there's no such thing as American education. It's just education. You either know everything about everything or you don't. Or like everybody on the planet, you know some things. You know some things that other people don't know, because you have what you call personal experiences. So they don't know about that. All right? And then there are oceans of things that you don't know about everything, and that applies to everybody. So when somebody walks around with their chest all stuck out about how many degrees they got, that's why they call them degrees. They are degrees of education. You just know a little bit about something. And a little bit about something over here, and a little bit about something over there, and a little bit about this, but it's all a little bit, no matter how much you know. How much you know about that grain of sand at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea that's different from the grain of sand next to it. How much do you know about that right this minute? What grain of sand am I talking about? All right. So there you have it. Is there a grain of sand at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea? That's the first thing. And how many? How many grains of sand at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea right this minute? How many people know the answer to that? Lots of things people don't know. But a person might say, well, there's lots of things I don't need to know. There's lots of things you do need to know. Every minute that you exist, we're getting back to the root. There's no such thing as American education or Asian education or English education. It's just education. The process of learning, because it's always a process. And you never know enough of anything that you should
All right.
know.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, unappreciated black third grade teacher from Ohio. Don't be a stranger. You're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on Blog Talk Radio. And if you would like to be a participant in today's show, just call this number, 516-453-9921. And you can listen to the show there, or you can press the number 1 button. If you have a question or a comment, please make it short. You can do that. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. And when I receive it, I will indicate to you that I'm going to use the word got it. It will go into rotation, and it will be read at some point in time. You can also get into the chat room. All you have to do is go to blogtalkradio.com, and you want to search where it says programs, hit the Produce Justice show, and then click on that, and then when that comes up, you can click on chat room, and you can get in there and the chat room and join the people who are in the chat room. Very good conversations going on there. Don't forget that you can also get the books by Mr. Fuller going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com, which he will be speaking about momentarily here. For all the information that you can get concerning what to do and what not to do, including when he started off the program about the tragic arrangements of the 3 T's. It's also in there. You can check that out. All righty, going back to the phone lines, let's go to Corey in Milwaukee. Corey, you are now on Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Greetings, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller. I'm looking at the revised expanded edition of the Counter-Racist Code book, 11. It's under the explanation part, the third paragraph. I'll read it. Of all the white people in the known universe, it is those white people who practice white supremacy racism that have the greatest will and the greatest ability to do whatever they choose to do in all areas of activity. They have shown through the practice of white supremacy that they have great will and great ability to subjugate non-white people through the skilled use of deceit and violence. They maintain this subjugation through a day-to-day code of thought, speech, and action, utilizing a variety of words and deeds in a manner that promotes falsehood, non-justice, and incorrectness. My question is this code so refined that the evidence would show that it becomes activated, in a sense, in white people when they become aware or are made aware of the difference of color?
Yes. That's when a white person has to make a choice, when they become aware of the differences in the colors where people are concerned. And they are taught this, apparently at a very early age, that they have to make a choice. Are you going to be on board, you might say, quote unquote, with the system of white supremacy or not? Every white person has to make that choice, which means, what is the system of white supremacy? It means, are you in agreement with people who have color in their skin? Are you in agreement with the concept and the practice that people who have color in their skin, color usually mean black and varieties of black, brown, red, yellow, beige, tan, any color in the skin of people, are you in agreement that these people should be dominated and mistreated for your convenience and for the convenience of everybody who is classified as white and functions as white in the known universe? You have to make that decision. If you're a white person, you have to make that decision. Other white people will insist on you making that decision. And that black people, brown people, yellow people, people of color, as we say sometimes, should be at all times dominated and mistreated for the convenience of people who are classified as white. And it's called the system of white supremacy. And I don't know at what age that kicks in, as early as possible, I imagine. It varies from individual to individual. They have to make that decision. Why? Because the white supremacist system demands that a white person make that decision. And so that's why we have the system of white supremacy being the most powerful government on planet Earth in May of 2022, and has been as long as anybody who is breathing now has been on this planet. And many people say way before then, going back at least, some people say, they kind of round it off from most scholars, something like 2,000 years altogether. Some people narrow it down to just the northwestern hemisphere and say, well, more or less 400 to 600 years. That's the usual settlement. And even including all of what you call the continent of Africa, they'll say no more than, say, 700 years at the most, maybe 600 or 700 years. And then some people say, no, you're talking about 6,000 years if you're really serious. At least 6,000 that you have had this system of white supremacy in place, that they have dominated and mistreated people of color for 6,000 years. So that's a whole lot of unwinding that we have to do. But we can do it much faster, as has been proven in science, that something can be taken apart much faster than it took the time to put it together. That's a scientific fact in anything.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Okay, Corey, thank you for your call. And you already know you're not a stranger. Let me remind you, this is basically a question and answer show. You have a question and let Mr. Fuller answer it. Some people have taken the liberty to promote their agenda and then sometimes try to mask it in a question. If you have a question, just ask your question. You don't have to promote your agenda. This is what Mr. Fuller, this is his show, and he's trying to expose what's been going on. So if you have that in mind to promote whatever you're selling or whatever, don't do that. Just ask a question and then let Mr. Fuller answer your question. Delbert, Texas, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. May I stay online when I ask my question?
Go ahead. Ask your question, please.
Has Mr. Fuller put together a book list of books written by white people that give information on how white supremacy is being conducted? Thank you.
All righty. Okay, we'll keep you online. Mr. Fuller?
No, I don't have a book list, and I'm not going to make one. It would be too long. And the reason why is because almost any book that you pick up, just a book that you find lying on the seat on a bus or in an airport station or anywhere, or you just happen to be at somebody's house, you just pick up a book and finger through it and look through it. And if it's written by a white author, you are looking at something written by a white person in the system of white supremacy, and it will probably be something on that page, any page you turn to, that you can learn, that tells you something that you can use to understand the system of white supremacy better, and or to have a better understanding of what to do about it, and replacing it with a better system called the system of justice. Just almost any page. Because that's how I discovered it. I started to make a book list once for myself because I was accumulating too many books. And I said, well, how many books do I really need on my shelf? And so after accumulating far too many books, I said, I can't keep doing this. So I just stopped acquiring books for the most part because I don't have the shelf space. The list would just go on and on and on and on and on. So you just pick up information wherever you can find it and say, now on this page that I'm looking at, is there anything that I can use that I'm looking at that will put it in my mind that if I put it to use, it will produce a constructive result. And that's the best way to handle any book written by anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at whatever page you're looking at and say, am I getting anything out of this that will help me if I take it seriously and try to apply whatever I'm looking at to my circumstances? Will it produce a constructive result? Or will it produce a constructive result for someone else that I know? You know, and sometimes you just run across, maybe in a 1,000-page book, you just happen to turn to one page. And there's just one thing on that one page that strikes you, that sticks with you for your entire existence on this planet, and helps you through a whole bunch of problems. Just that one paragraph, or one or two sentences, that really strikes you. You never know where you'll find it.
All righty. Thank you, Delbert, and you're on the line. We'll keep you there. Gmail, Mr. Fuller, this is from Aruku, says this. Mr. Fuller, I use VR, virtual reality, for entertainment purposes. Entertainment is the area of activity that I assign to video games / make-believe. Perhaps I used it pitifully to escape the role of victim of white supremacy because my race assignment, in capital letters, is not readily apparent. We all know that racism, in capital letters, is still subliminal in video games because that's what white supremacy means. Now, I consider that it's more constructive and codified to establish a direct / indirect people activity due to the audacity that VR, virtual reality, and video games are not actually real. I've seen racist comments in forums, and the development of these video games have racial controls directly separate from the other 9 areas of activity, one that can be distinguished in this concentration camp called white supremacy, VGQ. That area of activity, I suggest, should be distinguished as, quote, imagination, end of quote. Mr. Fuller, what is the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept for the word imagination? Is it a people activity worthy of being distinguished as a battlefront like the other areas of activity?
Well, I don't have imagination in the word guide, but it comes under thought. When you imagine something, that comes from the way that you go about thinking. So everything is thought, speech, and or action. You think, and then you speak about what you think about because that's what you do. That's just the process. You speak about what you think about. You think, then you speak, then you act on what you have thought about and what you have spoken about. So that's the usual sequence for all organisms. So imagination is incorporated into the process of thinking. Inventors imagine something. Someone looked at a bird and said, I think I can do that, but I don't have the equipment to do it. I wasn't born with that. I wasn't born with wings like a bird. So to compensate, I'll think about how I can put some wings on my shoulders maybe, or I can make something with some wings on it and then climb on whatever I made, a bicycle, put some wings on it and see if that'll work. And somebody had to what? Imagine that in order for these vehicles that we see going through the air now to come about. But somebody thought of an idea, many people going back thousands of years, they said, I wish I had wings. I could fly over that mountain like the birds do. And it wouldn't take me 6 years to get over the mountain, like it has been doing, to get to the other side. It takes 6 years to go climb that mountain to get to the other side. That bird does it in about 5 minutes. Oh boy, woe is me. I wish I had wings. So imagination is a thought. That's all. Just another word for thinking. And we should always try to think constructively so that we can produce constructive results, regardless of what we call it.
Mm-hmm.
Constructive results is what we want from every move that we make. We're given time and energy by the creator of time and energy. And every ounce of our time and energy should be used to produce constructive results. Whether it's through, you want to call it imagination or thinking or whatever.
All righty, constructive results. All right, thank you. 516-453-9921 is the number to call to get in contact with today's show with a question or VGQ. Make it short, please, ma'am, please, sir. And a special program has been set up for if you are a new caller, do that. Let the call screener know that you are a new caller. By the way, if you try to slick us, they can check that out. So, in other words, don't lie. Don't lie anyway, but don't lie. And then we'll take it from there. By the way, when Mr. Fuller does speak about his books that you can get by going to producejustice.com, I think there's an arrangement set up between producejustice.com and Amazon. And if you order the book from Amazon, please give a mention of this show. And I think something is set up for that special. I don't know exactly what it is, but I was told to make sure you mention that you can get the books by also going to Amazon. And that's good too. But basically, producejustice.com, where you can get the books from, and that's very important as a word guide. So, or as a guide that you know exactly what you're doing and refer to it from time to time. Before I get to the next two callers, this Mr. Fuller from the Gmails. Mr. Fuller, this comes from K. I'll just put it like that, K. Says this, Mr. Fuller, what are your thoughts about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and what is the codified response when black people are asked to speak about diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
Oh, if I was sitting in what we call the workplace right this minute, first, and somebody mentioned diversity, I would just say, what is the purpose of it? And what is going to be the constructive result? And first of all, what is it? What do you mean by diversity? That would be, always take whatever somebody gives you and ask, what does it mean? Whatever word they hand out, you look at that word and say, before we go any further, so that we don't have confusion, what is diversity? And don't help with the answer, because you didn't come up with the word. Now, if you came up with the word, you can give the answer. But if you didn't come up with the word that is being presented to you in this workplace, first thing you do, you want an understanding, a total understanding of what that word means and how it applies in every area of activity in that workplace. In economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and/or war. Any one or more of those areas of activity. This so-called diversity. Diverting, and don't help with the answer. And don't break into the person's answer when they are given the answer. Just have the next question ready. Don't argue about the answer that you get. Never argue about the answer that you get to any question that you ask anybody. Don't argue about the answer. Just be ready with the next question. Because of what? The law of the universe. The logic that comes from the universe. And that is the process of questions and answers will always take everybody right where they should be. The process of questions and answers. It won't take everybody where they want to be, but it's guaranteed to take everybody where everybody should be. That's just the nature of questions and answers when they're not interfered with. Question, answer. Question, answer. Hopefully this program is run this way too. Questions and answers. And even Neely full, sometimes I deviate from the question by giving an answer that's not directly related to the question, and that causes confusion. So you have to watch Neely full. I have a tendency to do that. I drift away from what the question really was. And I've been doing that for years. Some people don't notice it. I don't notice it until afterwards. And I say, I didn't answer that person's question because my mind drifted away into something else. And I got on another track altogether. So always, in answer to this question, when somebody mentions diversity, you might spend the next 3 days just saying what diversity means, and always keep in mind these two words. Is it going to produce a constructive result? And another question. If it is, what is that constructive result?
Mm-hmm.
Or those constructive results? You always want to keep those in mind. Anytime you interact with anybody in any setting, what's going to be the constructive results? Because no black person should be involved in anything that's not going to produce a constructive result. Period. In fact, no person should be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. Listen. What Mr. Fuller was speaking about, you can get this book by going to producejustice.com, producejustice.com, and read it for the suggestions, what to do, what not to do in the struggle against the
constructive results.
Yeah, for constructive results.
Excuse me for butting in.
No, that's all right, Mr. Fuller. You can butt me. You can butt in any time when I'm speaking. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I did forget what I was saying. But anyway, let's go to Taylor. Oh, yeah, about the book by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. That's how you get the book. Taylor, you are getting ready to get on. Let me see if I can get you in here. Okay, Taylor, you are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Hi, Grand Rising, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller. My question is, Mr. Fuller, yes, sir. I wanted to know, Mr. Fuller, what is a successful black person to you? And I'm going to get off the line, Mr. Bobby. Thank you.
Okay.
Third question was, what is a successful black person?
Yes.
Was that the question?
To you, what is a successful black person to you?
Oh, well, it's not that's not the criteria, not to me. What is a successful black person, period, within the context of the world as it is, according to what? not Neely Fuller, according to logic, because everything that Neely Fuller says better be based on logic. A successful black person in the system of white supremacy is a black person who has figured out how not to be a victim of white supremacy, period. Now, anything short of that, that black person is not successful. In other words, Neely Fuller will not be a success in anything until he's no longer subject to the system of white supremacy. That's the compensatory counter-racist logic. So according to that, there's no evidence that there's any such thing, any such person, rather, as a successful black person anywhere on the planet. Because all black people on planet Earth in May 2022 are subject to the system of white supremacy, truth be told.
All righty. There you are. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you very much for your call here. See if I can squeeze this one in here as we come up on the hour. Let's go to Derek in Georgia. Derek, good morning. What is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Hey, good morning, guys. What is my question? All right, my question is, Mr. Neely Fuller, very impressed with your logical abilities in general. You know, in this world, logic's not a common thing anymore. Neither is truth. I'm very impressed with your logical abilities. Here's my question. Are there like maybe 3 thinkers or 3 books that have profoundly helped your logical abilities? Because I would like some of those logical abilities for myself. That's the question.
All right. Mr. Fuller?
Not to my knowledge. Like I said, someone called in earlier and talked about what books would I recommend, and I tried to chase down the books. In fact, that's why I wrote the compensatory code, because I was looking for one book. I said, I'm tired of looking at all these different books. I mean, I've read, this and that and whatnot all over the place, all kinds of novels, Mutiny on the Bounty and whatnot, and I've read detective novels. I've read history books of just about every type that you can find, geography books. I said, I would like to have one book that tells a black person what to do about whatever problem you might have on that particular day, right this minute. I want a book like that. And that was back in the 1950s. And I couldn't find anything that even touched on that. And so then little by little, I just started taking notes without the intention of writing a book about how to handle situations myself. And the next thing you know, those notes that started off being 6 pages, 6 raggedy pages, because I carried them around with me all the time, what to say, what to do, what not to say, what not to do. It was just 6 pages. Then the 6 pages turned out to be 13 pages. Next thing you know, I had a suitcase full of notes. And the suitcase it bulged so much I had to put a belt around it to keep it so I could close it. Right. And then next thing, someone happened to look at it, looking through it some years later, after 1956, I think about 1970, and it was a doctor, who said, well, you got about 5 or 6 pages here that's really looks like it's saying something here and whatnot. You got any more of this? And I said, I got a whole lot of it. And I showed him that suitcase, and he said, "Oh my goodness!" And he said, "You know what? I'm going to copy this down. You got a book or two or three here, you know." And I said, "Yeah, you know." I said, "I've been thinking about that, but you know, I don't know about writing books, which I still don't." All right, and somebody who is what you call a real book writer, they'll probably look at some of my material and say, "Yeah, Fuller might think he knows a little something about something, but he don't know anything about writing no book." So now, I tried to do the best I could, but in answer to the question, I wish someone would consolidate everything, including what they get from my book, with the portion that I contribute, of course, with everybody's different name who has to say what has to be said, and say the best of counter-racist knowledge in the known universe, or something like that. I don't know what kind of title it would have, so that every black person, in answer to the caller's question, because that's what I want. That's what I want right now. Every black person will say, "This is the book for black people worldwide." I mean, you don't have to look at nothing else. I mean, this is it. All the best of the best of the best of everybody who has ever written anything or said anything, all of the scholars that ever existed, those who are dead now, those who are still here, and those who are coming on, that are addressing this race problem, we now finally have the one book that every black person can take all the rest of the books and just take them and donate them to whatever. But it just be one book on their coffee table or sitting on their shelf. They say, "This is your whole life." Yeah, that's the library right there when it comes to black people. That one book. It has all the best advice for every possible circumstance you will ever find anywhere for a black person in the world of white supremacy. There, you know, that is it. That one book there on that shelf, Mac. Just reach up there and get it. I mean, you can forget about all the rest of the books, because everything that's worth anything that's in the rest of the books is in that book. I would love to have that. I think about that all the time, because that's what I thought about the first time. But I couldn't find one. So I tried to write one myself. But I find that, hey, Fuller, you just have another contribution here. Because you keep finding stuff that other people have written that's not in your book. And so I am, everybody, I mean, somebody, I mean, maybe the African American Museum for History and all these scholars, everyone who is alive or dead, and all those who are yet unborn, until this problem is solved, you should have the best of, 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 the best of everything that everybody has written or said about solving each and every type problem that a black person has in one book. Now, who can do that? I got no idea.
All right. All right. Thank you, Derek, for your call. That concludes the first hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller. We went just a little bit over, but thank you for your listenership. If you have to go, then we'll hopefully see you next week. But stay tuned for the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, which will start in about 5 seconds. Thank you for listening. Good morning, and thank you for listening to the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. We thank you for all your listenership and the high volumes of calls and all that you do. We have statistics that reflect it, so you are helping to make this bad boy happen. Thank you very much. To get in contact with today's program, today being the 24th of May, 2022, you may call 516-453-9921. And if you have a question or comment, which Mr. Fuller calls a VGQ, all you have to do is when you call that number, give your name to the screen person so that I can properly give you an introduction without messing it up. And I'm prone to do that. I'll try to get better with that. I work at that, trying to do better. But sometimes I can't pronounce people's names properly. But anyway, give your name to the call screener so that I can do that. And since I'm on that subject, if you are a new caller, make sure that you tell the call screener that. And we have a little special thing that we do for new callers only. For new callers, yeah, get right in there, and my people will fix that, and then they will let me know that you are a new caller, and I will call you out. All righty. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY @gmail.com. Please, by the way, when you do that, do not write me a novel because I will not be able to read it in its entirety, and even the way that you may have it expressed there. That's what the telephone number is for, so that you can do that. May even that be brief. You can also get on the chat room or get in the chat room by going to blogtalkradio.com, and then you want to click on programs, or you'll see programs. Click on that, and then you'll come up with the Produce Justice show when you find it. When you do that, then you can click on that, and then there's a place where you can click on the chat, and you can get into the chat room, and they have great conversations in there. Speaking about great conversations, if you missed anything from last week, Constructive Action Items gives a list of what we have discussed, and it's pretty interesting. So you may want to do that. Yes, that is a constructive result. Thank you, Constructive Action Items. Yes. Okay. All right. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah. And any other announcement, you can get by going to producejustice.com, including when Mr. Fuller is also on another show, in particular the Carl Nelson Show, which is on WOL in Washington, D.C. When that happens, I'm given a notice, and I will notify you. And it also will be noticed. You can get the notice by going to producejustice.com, and that is on there. Okay. See, we got the new caller alert. Okay. All righty. Let's get back into it. Joe from Harlem, see if I can get that in. Okay, Joe, you're in.
Hey, good morning. Another attempting kind of racists have made a statement, and I would like to know if Mr. Fuller thoughts on it, if it's true or false, and why is it true or false. So the statement is, the worldwide system of racism and white supremacy doesn't go away when white people go away.
In the worldwide system of white supremacy, will it go away if white people go away?
I'll repeat it. It says the worldwide system of racism, white supremacy does not go away when white people go away. Is that true or false? And why is it true or why is it false?
Yeah, you have to have white people in order to practice white supremacy. You can't have white supremacy without people who are designated as being white. That's just like saying, you have a car without having a car. You can't have a car without having a car. You can't have breakfast without having breakfast. It's self-explanatory. White supremacy means you have to have white people. you have to have, otherwise you can't call it white supremacy. You can call it some other type of supremacy, but it's not white supremacy. You have to have white people in order to have white supremacy. I think that answers the question.
Okay, wait a minute. Let me see. Joe, did that answer your question?
Hello.
Joe?
It didn't? No, it doesn't answer the question. Because the statement was, worldwide system of racism, white supremacy does not go away when white people go away. So the person is saying that white supremacy, racism, does not go away when white people are not here, basically. And so that was the statement. So you're basically saying it's not true. It's false. That's not correct. Like, you have to have white people. Yeah.
Oh, that was a VGQ then. In other words, somebody was making that statement. Somebody made the statement, correct?
Yeah. Yes, it was a VGQ.
Well, then the person who made. Go ahead, sir. I'm trying to understand what's going on.
I was just trying to understand what was your point of view of that. That was a VGQ, but I wanted to know, did you consider that to be true or false? Was that your type of thinking as well? Like, white supremacy, if white people aren't here, will white supremacy continue even though white people aren't here anymore? Because that's what the statement is saying. Because it says white supremacy doesn't go away when white people go away.
Well, that was a statement, but that's according to counter-racist logic, you got to have white people in order to have white supremacy. Now, that's my view. But if somebody else has another view, well, they can express that view, but I don't understand that view. That's all.
Okay.
That's best I can say with that.
All right, Joe. Thank you. And don't be a stranger. Mr. Fuller, it's been brought to my attention by Justice Wire that, I'll just read it. It says, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller, were either of you aware that the security guard at the Tops grocery store in Buffalo, who was the first person killed, was also a bit of a scientist who had devised a way for cars to run off of water? How ironic it is it then that he was in that mix, considering him continuing to live? Would have completely upset and affected thousands of oil men, most of whom are white supremacists. Think about it. Look it up, by the way, if you don't believe me. That's a question for you and a question for me, Mr. Fuller, and I will say this. I do have knowledge, and this was given to me back in, I believe it was 2008, of a person that was in this locale that had that same information and that automobiles could run off of water, had the patent for it. I was told, and I'm not going to mention the companies, but I was told that the patent was bought by certain companies, that automobile companies that you guys already know about, or most people know about. And he was speaking with a friend of mine, and the friend was relaying this information. He was scared because he felt that someone was trying to kill him also. And in fact, I was told that he was eventually eliminated, but had developed a carburetor that could run off of what is that? Not hydroelectricity, but anyway, hydrogen, I guess it is, water anyway. But I couldn't verify that, but I had heard about that. Mr. Fuller, have you had any knowledge about this gentleman who was the first security guard who was killed, that he had something to do with an automobile or cars that could run off of water?
Haven't heard that until now.
Okay. There you go, Justice Warrior. There you go. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about that, but I don't know if it's true or not true, but I do understand that the person here in this locale was killed. Anyway, let's go to Adam in British Columbia. Darnell, hang on, you should be next. Okay, Adam in British Columbia.
Yes. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, yeah. I have one question. It's more of a request. And every time when I hear Mr. Fuller speak about how we were born prisoners of war, each time when he speaks on it, he details it a little bit more, and he frames it with a little bit more like he's more precise with it each time. So I'm just wondering if Mr. Fuller can explain again with more precision on how we were all born, and as prisoners of war, dating back to slavery, even beyond that. And yeah, I would appreciate it if we could.
All right.
So that's my request. Yes,
okay.
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you. Well, keep it right there, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, I'll just try as best I can to explain. What is a prisoner of war? Anytime anybody uses the term, the person who is using the term should explain what it means. Well, prisoner of war, in order to be a prisoner of war, you have to be in a war. So war was declared and put in the execution. In other words, it became active, an active war. First white person decided that it was a great idea to dominate and mistreat all people who are considered people of color or people who are non-white for the benefit of people who are white. Now, that was a great idea that evolved into what people became institutionalized as a system of white supremacy. Now, having done that, they decided that they'd just keep it going. And that everybody who since that was a declaration of war, anytime you mistreat people, that's war. Any type of mistreatment, somebody's making war against you as an individual, they're mistreating you, even in the smallest or the largest context. So, all of the people who are classified as non-white in May of 2022 are subject to the system of white supremacy, which means they are prisoners of war. They are prisoners of the people who believe in and who practice the system of white supremacy, the white people who do that, who have been the soldiers who have done this conquest. That's a done deal. It's not in the process of happening. It happened a long time ago. And all of the non-white people on the planet now are subject to that government, that prison system called the system of white supremacy. That's the name of the prison. The system of white supremacy is the name of a prison, the greatest prison ever invented in the minds of people, the most efficient prison system ever invented in the minds of people in recorded history. Nothing has been greater. So that makes all people classified as non-white as prisoners of war, because that's what it is, a war. So what we should have is a counter-war against that warlike or warring system called the system of white supremacy, and replace it with a system that is better. That system would be the system of justice. So until then, we are all prisoners of war and should be aware that we are prisoners of war. Because if you're a prisoner of war, and you're not aware that you're a prisoner of war, you will make huge mistakes to your detriment that will not improve your condition at all. And most of the people of the planet, most of the non-white people of the planet, are not aware that they are prisoners of war. If you're born in a prison, just like a fish that's born in water, a fish takes the water for granted. A fish doesn't really realize that it's in water until the fish is out of the water. Then that comes as a shock to the fish. And it begins to immediately flop around. I mean, they want to get back to the water because that's all they're used to. That's their environment.
Mm-hmm.
And the prisoners of war, called non-white people, are the same. But we have never been out of the system, so the system is all we know. That's why we are not aware of the system. We think that the prison walls, white skin, is a normal condition. But it is normal, because that's all we've ever known, if you're talking about the word normal. But is it correct? And the answer is no.
Okay.
Because we shouldn't have a system of white supremacy or a system of mistreatment of any kind anywhere on the planet. We should have universal man, universal woman, and quality relationships between people in every area of activity 24/7. Nothing but quality, nothing but constructive results in everything that people do. That's the type of world that we should have right now in May 2022. And the textbook for victims of white supremacy is supposed to be designed to help us achieve that.
Mm-hmm. And also in that textbook, it gives suggestions, if you will, Mr. Fuller, how to dismantle, listen very carefully, dismantle the system of white supremacy is racism, and listen to this, and replace it with justice. And Mr. Fuller gives a compensatory definition of justice. It's not enough just to dismantle it. You have to replace it with the system of justice. Speaking about that, going into the chat room, this was mentioned that on that security guard, mentioned that Justice Warrior mentioned that the security guard had a patent for that, and constructive action items basically verified that information. That, and it's in the chat room if you want to know where you can get it, that evidently this must be true. He did have a patent on that, and they gave constructive action and gave the web site where you can get this information from. It's very detailed. That's why I'm not going to give it, but it's very detailed for those that want to get into the chat room and see that that's an automobile that can run off of water, which makes you wonder about the so-called oil shortages. Really makes you wonder. But anyway, for those of you who want to do that, you can go to blogtalkradio.com and let's see, wait a minute. Yeah, wait a minute, because the screen is coming up here. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, you can go to our website to get into the chat room. That is for blogtalkradio.com, and then you want to go, once you get that, then click on the Produce Justice show. You do that, then you'll see the chat room come up, and you click on that, then you can get into the chat room and get all that information, and then verify it to see what's happened, if that's true or if it's not true. You can do that. Okay. Darnell, New York. You're there with Mr. Fuller.
Yes, hello. Mr. Fuller, what makes deception such a powerful tool for the white supremacists against the non-white people in the system of white supremacy?
The question is what?
What makes deception such a powerful tool against the victims of white supremacy?
Oh, what makes deception a powerful tool?
Yes.
Because if you want to have power over people, you'll always have power over people if that person is able to deceive you in everything that they want to deceive you about. The most powerful person in any room is a person who can deceive everybody else in the room. That's according to what? Logic. If I can fool everybody, if there's 10 people in a room, and I'm the person that's got the other 9 people fooled about whatever I want to fool them about in any area of activity, then I'm the most powerful person. It's just the way it works. Fooling people. The white supremacists, for example, told people that you sign this paper, Chief, and it's a treaty. I'm going to treat you to a better situation than you have had before. So just sign here. And this is what you call a treaty. And it means that your situation is going to improve. That's what the words in this treaty means. But the chief believed it. You're talking about people who are so-called Indians. And by believing it, many chiefs were deceived because the person who told them this, that their situation would improve if they signed this paper, were not telling the truth. Because in order to deceive people, you don't tell the truth. All right. Example. And the white supremacists are the greatest deceivers in the history of the world, according to the record. And therefore, they're the most powerful people on the planet because they're the most powerful deceivers. They're able to talk to people in such a way that people will believe what they say. And when you can get someone to believe everything that you say, you can control that person. Now, also, the science of deception is you know how to mix truth with things that are not true. You have to be able to do that. And the white supremacists are the greatest deceivers in doing that. They will say out of 10 things, they'll say 8 things that are absolutely true. When you double check it, even when you doubt it, you'll double check it, triple check it, you'll find out that what they're saying is absolutely true. 8 out of those 10 things. But then what they're skilled at is they will sneak in those other 2 things that are absolutely not true. And that will mess up the 8 things that are true.
Yes, sir.
They're the greatest deceivers when it comes to that. How to mix truth with something that's not true.
Yes, sir. It's funny that you mentioned that, Mr. Fuller, because while you were giving that illustration, the term snake oil salesman came to my mind. All right. Anyway, thank you, Darnell, for your call. Let me do this. You've been listening and are listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller, also called the CRCS. And we do thank you for your listenership. To get in contact with the show, again, you can call this number 516-453-9921. Press the number 1 button if you have a question or comment. Please be brief, and we'll try to get you on. If you are a new caller alert. Make sure you tell the call screener, if you are indeed a new caller, and we have a special arrangement for new callers only, okay? And if you try to run game, and the man at the control or the person at the control will know who you are, so do not do that. Don't lie. You can also Gmail me or Gmail the show at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And then when I receive it, I will tell you that I got it, and it will be read at a different time, not today, but I will inform you when it will be read, date, and time. You can also get into the chat room by going to the blogtalkradio.com. You want to click on programs, the Produce Justice Show, and then once you get that, click on chat, and you are in the chat, and they be blowing up in there on a lot of stuff right now. They seem to be saying that security guard that was killed in Buffalo had a patent, and I guess it's been verified that he did have a patent, and I guess it was registered if you have a patent. Yeah, and the information about all that is on or in the chat room, and you can get that and check it out yourself. You can also get Mr. Fuller's books by going to producejustice.com, producejustice.com, to know what and what not to do. You need to do that. That is at producejustice.com, also referred to as the code book. Okay, let's continue on with the show. Mr. Fuller, we have something from Fareed. It says this, Mr. Fuller, we often hear people say that they suffer from mental illness, diseases, deficiencies, etc. Mr. Fuller, is it logical or code for non-whites to say that we suffer from white supremacy as a mental illness, disease, or deficiency? Meaning, is white supremacy our diagnosis?
Well, people do suffer from that disease. Yes, it is a disease. If you look at the definition of disease, just a common definition you'll find in most English dictionaries, what does the word disease mean? It's dissing ease. It's against ease. It's against being well. And the system of white supremacy is a religious and political system that makes people ill, all people. The system of white supremacy itself is a disease on the body politic of the people of the known universe. Why? Because it's not something that produces constructive results in the behavior of people. Now, the system of white supremacy does produce things, things, with the greatest of efficiency, more than any other system in recorded history that has come to my attention. There's nothing that parallels the system of white supremacy when it comes to the production of things, the distribution of things, the use of things, that you use, all the modern things and just things, period. The system of white supremacy is the greatest producer of things in recorded history as far as I know. In recorded history. But it is the greatest destroyer of people in recorded history. In the minds and bodies of people. It makes rot out of the minds of the subject people and makes rot of the minds of the white people who perpetuate it, who destroy the minds and bodies of the non-white people of the planet. If they build up their bodies, they'll destroy their minds. If they build up their minds, they'll destroy their bodies. And enjoy. Not only destroy, but enjoy destruction. The system of white supremacy is built in such a way that it enjoys destroying people. And it destroys things, but it also builds things. But it guarantees that people will not interact with people in a manner that produces the most constructive result. It guarantees that won't happen. That's why you have to get rid of the system of white supremacy in order to have a planet of people, a universe of people, where people have quality relationships. It's absolutely impossible for people to have quality relationships. Black people with white people with each other, black people with each other, black people with white people, any mix or match, males with females. You're not going to have a quality relationship in the system of white supremacy, period. The system of white supremacy destroys all real quality between people and makes people deceptive, makes people conniving, makes people to be non-quality people in all of their relationships in every area of activity. The system of white supremacy does that deliberately in economics, in education. Somebody mentioned education earlier in this program about American education. No, it's the system of white supremacy. That's the greatest so-called education on the planet. But it's a limited education. It's limited to things of worshiping things and destroying people. That's what it fundamentally does. Destroys people's minds, and if it builds up their bodies, it still will destroy their minds in such a way that their body will be in decay too.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't have balance between anything that involves people, but it has a lot of balance when it comes to producing things. But the system of white supremacy has no regard for people at all.
At all.
First of all, for sure, it guarantees that non-white people will be people who are totally toxic. And everything that we touch turns into a mess. This is why the system of white supremacy has to be, or should be, definitely replaced with the system of justice, which would be a system that where things are used to make people conduct themselves with more constructive results. You're not going to get that in the system of white supremacy. Black people will continue to kill black people, and white people will continue to kill and destroy black people, and black people will destroy each other, and white people will, black people will just go after white people with animosity. It doesn't build. The system of white supremacy is just not built for people relations to be anywhere near what they should be at all.
All righty. Word to the chat room, people. Watch your name calling. Watch your name calling. You know better. Dre, Oklahoma. You are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Yo, good morning, Mr. Fuller, Mr. Bobby. I know you advise in your code book that we seek a residence that isn't close to other people, but for those of us who currently live in areas where we are close to other people, like apartments, where you have loud, unruly, hostile neighbors who are unapproachable and unreasonable, how do you counteract these types of people without it turning into a physical altercation?
Counteract what types of people?
Counteract loud, belligerent, approachable, unreasonable people who if you go and approach them that they're going to, try to start a physical altercation with you and you're really not trying to go there with them.
Minimize contact, like the book says. That's in the textbook. You minimize all unnecessary contact. You do that with people, period, anyway. You should. That's an absolute. Minimize all unnecessary contact with people. Make every contact you make with every person constructive. And how do you do that? First of all, your conversation should be, in order to have a conversation, just questions and answers. Mm-hmm. And don't argue about the answers that you get. Just be ready with the next question. And then once the questions and answers are over, you've got your constructive answers, hopefully, all right, where you can use the answers that you got to your questions to produce constructive results. You break off all conversation.
Okay.
That's the key. You do not have what you call trivial conversation with anybody. Everything is just a matter of questions and answers.
Yes, sir.
You might say this acting
but that's
like
what I'm saying. What if these people are unapproachable?
Oh, then you minimize contact with them. What you mean by unapproachable is that the minute that you say anything to them, they want to fight or something?
Yes, sir.
Oh, then you say, the code book has it in there. Sir, ma'am, I will talk to you some other time. Now, you didn't say you'll never talk to them again or anything like that. You just say you have something else to do at the moment, and you will talk to them at some other time. And then you depart. You break contact. I mean, you're in a hurry. It's someplace you've got to go. And you will be telling the truth.
Yes.
So you always stick with the truth. You don't say something that's not true. That's following in the footsteps of the white supremacy. Mm-hmm. All right? And that's codified.
That's codified.
Sir, ma'am, I will talk to you. Once they start cursing and shouting and getting loud and all that, sir, ma'am, I will talk to you at some other time. And you will if you encounter them. But the next time you talk to them, you might do the same thing. Tell them the same thing. I will talk to you at some other time. Mm-hmm. You're willing to do that. But not now, because they're screaming and yelling and cussing.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dre, thank you. I don't recall you being a call in, but anyway, thank you for calling in. Mr. Fuller, on that same line that you just answered, it's the screaming and the shouting and all that, for the new callers or the people who are new that are listening to the program, because we have several people on the line, so a lot of people are listening. Why isn't why should I know the answer, and a lot of other people do, but why shouldn't you call somebody out of their name or name calling?
Oh, that's true. That's one of the 10 basic stops. That's in the original textbook and in the revised expanded edition. And it's one of what I call the 10 basic stops. Stop name calling. Never, ever, 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 ever call anybody, anywhere, at any time, a name that the person does not want to be called.
Why?
Because it makes for conflict. You don't do it jokingly or anything else. Always call a person by the name and or title that the person wants to be called. Always. Whether the person is white or non-white. That's one of the 10 basic stops. Stop name calling. I don't care what kind of name you have for a person. Call the name of the person find out what name or title the person wants to be called. Even if they change their name 5 times in the same day, they'll say, well, before noon, I'm Mac the Knife. In afternoon, I'm Sweet Daddy. So you say, that's what you want me to call you? Mac the Knife before noon? Say, yeah. That's what I want you to call me. Say, okay. Hey, good morning, Mac the Knife. That's the first thing you do. It's still morning. Then if you look at the clock and it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, he says, he's Sweet Daddy. So, hey, Sweet Daddy, how you doing? You know. You enjoy your lunch? You know. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't cost you nothing to do that.
Mm-hmm. I
mean, somebody might look at you in amazement and say, "You calling him Sweet Daddy?" I mean, what you all got going here? You know. You say, "Well, that's what he wants me to call him." Didn't you ask him? All right. You say, "Well, he didn't ask me to call him that. He asked me to call him Henry Brown all the time." Well, that's what he told you. That's not what he told me. I call him what he told me he wants to be called. I don't argue with him about that. I call him whatever he wants to be called. Well, what if he wants to be called King Jesus? I call him King Jesus. That's what he asked me to call him. Duh, where's the problem? Always, according to the code, call people by the name or title that they want to be called. Don't you give them no kind of name or title at all, ever. Unless they ask you to give them a name or title. Unless the person say, call me anything you want to call me. You know, then you do that.
Okay. All righty. This question from the Gmails says this, Mr. Fuller, does the recent mass shooting in Buffalo, New York show that blacks are still helpless children under the system of white supremacy? Thanks.
It can be said that, yes. Because it happened in the system of white supremacy. The system of white supremacy is the reason that it happens, because the system of white supremacy is the reason that anything happens to any person of color. Why? Because every person of color is in the system of white supremacy. In the prison camp called the system of white supremacy. The prison camp being the whole planet. And every non-white person on this planet, 24/7 in every area of activity, is subject to the prison masters called the system of white supremacy. That's the name of the prison. And the system itself is called the system of white supremacy. That's the prison system. So, everything that happens in the prison happens because, directly, indirectly, of the system of white supremacy itself. Because nothing is outside of the system of white supremacy. Nothing.
Okay. All righty. Let's see here. Delbert, are you there? Or did we already get you?
You already got me.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You were just listening. Okay. All right.
Sir.
Thank you, Delbert. My bad. All right, Mr. Fuller, this is the time that we're going to talk about your book. For those of you that don't know, you can get the book by going to producejustice.com, but Neely Fuller is going to explain to you about the book. Mr. Fuller?
Yes, the book is supposed to help to solve the race problem. That's why I wrote it. I didn't want to just pick around at it. I said, I'm going to try to write the book, but I found out that would take a better mind than mine. I found that out, logically speaking, in the process of writing the book. Not only that, this book has been out the original, since 1984. And I was talking about it or reading from notes that I put in it long before 1984, going all the way back to the 1950s, really. All right? The race problem has not been solved. So my book, I cannot say to anyone that this will solve the race problem. It might do so in the future. It hasn't done so now. So Neely Fuller's book, for the reason he decided to write it, so far is a failure. Because, for one thing, first of all, it's not in the hands of every non-white person on the planet. And it's in very few hands. And second, even if it was in every hand of every person and every person was familiar with everything in the book, that doesn't say that they would act on it. So then that would be a problem, which means Neely Fuller would have failed. Somebody said years ago to Neely Fuller that, Fuller, you know what? I got the solution to the race problem, but I can't get people to listen to me. I say, then you don't have the solution. According to logic. I mean, the proof of that, when you got the solution to a problem, the problem is solved. So don't ever say you got the solution to any problem and you haven't solved the problem. So I wrote the book with the intention of solving the race problem. So if I leave this planet, most likely I got a few days left, I would have left this problem without solving the problem, which means Neely Fuller's a failure in what he set out to do. Until somebody maybe picks up the book later on, maybe years in the future when they try everything else, and say, let's try Fuller's codified approach and take it seriously, and hopefully it will solve the problem if the problem isn't solved by somebody else doing something else. But you can get the book by going to producejustice.com. It's supposed to help you as an individual person if you are a victim of white supremacy. If you're not a victim of white supremacy, the book is not written for you anyway. But if you consider yourself to be a victim of racism, white supremacy, in any area of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and or war, you consider yourself to be a victim of white supremacy, then the book is written to help you to solve whatever problem you have as a victim of white supremacy in one or more of these 9 areas of activity, which just about covers everything. Some people say health should have been included, but health was included under all of the areas of activity, but particularly in the first area, which is economics. Economics is the use of time and energy. If you use your time and energy correctly, you are a healthy person. But in the system of white supremacy, they don't allow the black person, a person of color, to do much of anything that's going to have a constructive result. So they poison everything: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, all of the areas of activity when it comes to non-white, they meaning the white supremacists. So the textbook is supposed to be written to help the individual person on a daily basis to understand what's going on around them, that person, and what to do about it if it should or should not be done. Whatever is done, if it's done in the best way that will produce the most constructive result. That's what the book is supposed to help you to do. Go about doing everything that will produce the most constructive result for you or or for any other person who is a victim of white supremacy. And also to help to produce a product that's never existed, and that product is called justice. In a capsule, that's what this book is for. You can get it by going to producejustice.com. And that's in everything that you say and do. That's why there's a word guide, too. How to use words, how not to use words, what questions to ask when certain words are used. It's a guide. It doesn't have all the situations in it, everything that can possibly come up. Mm-hmm. It doesn't cover everything, but it's a basic guide that will tell you how to think about things.
Yes, sir.
Because everything comes from thought. Go to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com.
Okay.
And how to get the book is there, and some other information.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. As we wind down the program, there was a big thank you from Constructive Action Items. Just basically has this to say that they wanted to thank you, Mr. Fuller, for your work, and said that I would still be confused if I didn't find your program and your book. Your book has helped Constructive Action Items, as it has a lot of people, with your suggestions. And by going to producejustice.com, you can get the book, and also understand that you can order the book through Amazon. Evidently, there must be an agreement somewhere. But your book is helpful to some to find it helpful, and that's good. And as we wind down this program, we got about a little bit over a minute. I'm going to give that minute to you, Mr. Fuller, to conclude today's program.
Well, I'm going to conclude it with the subject of what I started the program off today with, and I might do this again because this is very important along about now. There are going to be some very trying times, in my opinion, ahead for the rest of this decade up until 2030. And I think it's just going to be as ugly as the last 10. The last 10 have been pretty ugly. Mm-hmm. Lots of things have happened that shouldn't have happened. A few things happened that should have happened, but more things happened that shouldn't have happened in the last 10 years than things that should have happened in all areas of activity. I think it's going to be more of the same. So tighten your seat belts, for one thing. Don't spend as much money as you have been. Start saving, and stop buying stuff that are not of constructive value. Buy stuff in the interest of marketing and keeping the economy flowing, but spend wisely, as best, if you want to use that word, or with logic, and don't accumulate so much extra stuff that really is just going to have to be moved and get in the way, because you might have to move a lot if you're a person of color. That's anywhere on the planet. Everything is becoming now in motion. People are being forced to move. The weather, the climate is changing and all like that. And all types of conditions are being changed. So be aware of these things. So the things you have to move, have them be things that you can really use, not things you're just going to be piling up. And then improve your relationships by only talking with people who are going to be talking something of constructive value. That's white or non-white.
Okay.
Get rid of the garbage conversations, all of it.
All righty. Got to leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, callers, for everybody. Forgive us. Forgive me for any mistakes I've made, but we'll try to do better next week. ProduceJustice.com is where you go. See you next week.